My name is Rich Voltz, and I am the Associate Director of the Illinois Association of School Administrators. This webinar is part of the series of webinars I have developed for teacher evaluators. The topic of this webinar is Teacher Reflection Tips. First, a quick review of the Voltz 6 steps to effective teacher evaluation. These steps consist of 1. Concentrate on the correct domain component. Based on the Danielson research, I have developed a hierarchy for which components to focus on for informal observations. The hierarchy starts with 3C, engaging students in learning, then 3B, questioning and discussion techniques, then 3A, communicating with students, then 3D, using assessment and instruction, then all of the components of Domain 2 for classroom environment. Step 2 is get buy-in in the process. This means that teachers need to receive proper professional development around the frameworks, and teacher leaders need to know how school leaders are actually doing the work of evaluating teachers. Step 3 is change the focus, which means the evaluator should first be looking at what the students are learning. Focus on what students are learning, not what the teacher is doing. Step 4 is observe more. This might be the most important step. School leaders need to dedicate an adequate amount of time to observation of teachers. It cannot just be the old way of a dog and pony show when the teacher knew you were coming in the classroom and could script a performance. The evaluator needs to make multiple informal observations, not only to coach the teacher to improvement, to make sure the teacher is actually applying best practices to their everyday work. Step 5 is reflection is the key. This is the concept that after each observation, the evaluator needs to talk face-to-face with the teacher and have the teacher reflect on their own performance. And this also gives the evaluator the opportunity to ask focused, reflective questions to improve the teacher's performance. Step 6 is know when to play the proper role. This refers to the evaluator's role in the reflection and post-observation conferences. In the best case scenario, the evaluator coaches the teacher to improve their own performance. With new teachers, this could be mentoring, and with lower performing teachers, the evaluator needs to be prepared to tell the teacher how to incorporate best teacher practices into their teaching. Observations without reflective discussion have very little value. In the old teacher evaluation system, many teacher evaluators would schedule one formal observation with the teacher. The two parties would conduct a pre-observation conference and discuss the lesson to be observed. The teacher would explain what lesson he or she is teaching, what he or she hopes to have the students know and be able to do as a result of the lesson. They also might discuss the learning or behavior needs of some of the students in the class, and the teacher might even request that the evaluator take notes of certain aspects of his or her teaching, such as equitable response opportunities, quality of questions asked, or perceived engagement of the students. Then the evaluator would observe the teacher on the predetermined date and schedule a post-observation conference. These scheduled teacher formal observations are often referred to as the dog and pony shows. It is unrealistic and unprofessional for a teacher rating to be totally based on an observation when the teacher and students know the evaluator will be in the room. While state evaluation law requires that a formal observation be scheduled with the teacher, the evaluator also needs to make several informal evaluations and observations to ensure that the formal observation reflects actual teacher practice. During the typical teacher formal observation process, the evaluator did most or all of the talking in the post-observation, and the teacher endured this process. There was little teacher reflection, little commitment to an action plan by the teacher, or follow-up by the evaluator to determine if the teacher changed their performance. Just like we want teachers to encourage students to do their own intellectual thinking in a distinguished classroom, we want teachers to do intellectual thinking about their own teaching performance as it relates to teacher evaluation. These reflective conversations are the most important part of the teacher evaluation process. Teacher evaluation is not about the rating. It is about improving the teaching performance to a distinguished level for all teachers. Probably the most important step of the teacher evaluation process is this reflective conference with the teacher. In my protocol, the teacher would be instructed to highlight the critical attributes for the same domain component that the evaluator was focusing on before coming to the reflective meeting. The two parties would discuss their ratings and give explanations into why they highlighted certain attributes. This slide is an example of finished scoring rubric by a teacher evaluation for Danielson Domain Component 2A. In this instance, the teacher evaluator had visited the classroom for an informal observation concentrating on 2A, creating an environment of respect and rapport. The evaluator has recorded evidence around this component. After recording the evidence, the evaluator highlighted 4 critical attributes in the proficient column and 1 critical attribute in the distinguished column. The teacher would be asked to highlight the critical attributes for 2A that he or she thought best defined the teaching that was observed. The teacher and evaluator would have a reflective discussion around these ratings and hopefully would come to an agreement for the rating. There will be times when the teacher will offer contextual evidence that would support his or her position, and the evaluator would change to his or her rating. There are times when the evaluator will explain to the satisfaction of the teacher why the rating will not change. Of course, there also may be times when they do not agree, and in the end, the evaluator's rating is final. A procedure I try to get teacher evaluators to do is to hold all reflective conferences and meetings between the teacher and evaluator in the teacher's classroom. There are several reasons for doing this. First, if the meeting is in the teacher's room, it is in the teacher's venue. It is less intimidating than the principal's office. Second, the teacher will have all the materials in the room and can refer or bring out these materials in the conference. Third, by conducting the meeting in the teacher's room, the evaluator is more in charge of the time allotted to the meeting. The evaluator can set the meeting time and then tactfully call the meeting to end when the time has expired. It is much easier to leave the teacher's room than the principal's office when the meeting comes to the end. As soon as possible following a teacher observation, the evaluator should share a copy of the evidence gathered during the observation to the teacher. After gathering the observational evidence and scoring the evidence against the critical attributes of the Danielson frameworks for teaching, the evaluator also needs to prepare a reflective question to ask the teacher. The evaluator should review the evidence and scoring and decide the most critical aspect that the evaluator wants the teacher to improve. If, for example, the evaluator was collecting evidence against 3C, engaging students in learning, the evaluator contemplates various reflective questions. On this slide are 4 possible reflective questions to ask the teacher. After the person being observed has reflected, then it is time for that person to work on a plan of action to improve their teaching. The plan should be determined by the person being evaluated, and the evaluator should be a facilitator and direct the conversation toward an action goal, including specific statements that can be measured and are attainable. Establish a timeline for completion or checking on the goal, and finally, affirming by the person being evaluated that they will follow through, and the evaluator will check back on the progress. Many of you will recognize this as a SMART goal process. Coaching adults to improve is often seen as a difficult process. The following information are some tips to help you do this work well. The evaluator should listen deeply to the teacher. Listen to what the teacher wants to improve and use that information to drive the goal-setting process. The evaluator should ask probing questions, such as, what has the teacher previously done to improve his or her teaching concerning the concepts that have been discussed in the reflective conference following the observations? The evaluator should listen for commitment from the teacher. Is the teacher committed to improving their own performance based on the input they provided in the reflective conference? Remember, we have to get the teacher to take specific action. So the evaluator should be listening for what specific action the teacher is willing to take and by what time. All of this should be summarized into an action plan. And I really like the teacher to write the action plan either in a SMART goal format or in a goal format that the teacher has provided the input and the responsibility to do the work. A repeat of a point I made earlier is that it's vitally important that the evaluator have a face-to-face meeting with the teacher after each informal and formal observation. The reflective questions on this slide are for you to reflect on the instruction that was given during this webinar today. Do you have teachers self-rate according to the critical attributes of the Danielson frameworks? Do you have teachers reflect on their own performance to determine areas they want to improve? Do you have teachers develop an action plan following an observation? Do you follow up on a teacher's performance to determine if they have internalized their own actions for improvement? If not, how do teachers change their performance based on your teacher evaluation practices? For additional information on this or other topics, you can contact me at rvoltz@iasaedu.org. You could read my blog site, richvoltz.edublogs.org, or you could go to my website, illinoisasa.wikispaces.com, where I have a variety of materials related to the Danielson frameworks and teacher evaluation.